So I did say we were going to be chatting property, and we got Harry in from Etchells and Young once again. Lucky to have you in the studio. Welcome back.
Great. Thanks, Al.
And today we are going to dive into quite a bit that we discussed last week. A lot of stuff that we kind of threw forward to this week, which I'm very excited about. And we're talking rental properties again.
Rentals indeed, yes.
Yeah. So if you are in the market for rentals, maybe this is definitely a conversation you must be paying attention to, especially when it comes to the rights and the wrongs of just that. Getting into a rental property and what your rights are, what your rights are as a landlord as well. But you know what? I'm not the professional. You are, Harry.
Thanks, Alja. So I think, my intention or our intention with this, as we discussed beforehand, is really just to try and give both landlords and tenants some help and advice.
Yeah.
Having been in this business now for the last 21 odd years, as you can imagine, we've seen quite a lot of wrongs and rights.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, I think I mentioned last week, if any of us are ever gonna rent a property as rented out as a landlord or rented to live in as a tenant, there's so much that we can still learn about how to do this correctly and the right way.
Yeah. Now, I'm looking for a property. I found something on, let's say, one of the search engines that pop up on the internet, and I apply to go and view the place, and I like it, etc. And they throw me with a 2-month deposit that I have to pay, for argument's sake.
Okay.
What is my next step? And tell me a little bit about that deposit.
All right, great. So just before the deposit, the normal procedure is going to be the rental agent, and let's assume you've worked through an agent here, not gone direct to the landlord. The rental agent is going to give you an application form. On that application form, there's going to be certain vetting information that they're going to go through. They're going to see that you can afford the place. They're going to do some screening and some checks with your ex-landlord, with your employer that you can afford it, and then they're going to present you with a lease agreement to sign. And just to say, the current version of the Rental Housing Act does not make it mandatory that you must sign a lease agreement. But if you look at the transaction here, what you're committing to, and it is definitely, firstly, in the landlord, and secondly, also in the tenant's interest to sign a proper lease agreement. So that's in place so that your contract, for the next 12 months living in that property is in place. If it's not in place, and it goes to court, a verbal agreement is still an agreement, but it's about proving what was said and what was agreed.
So in other words, let's say, for argument's sake, you are my landlord. I've come and had a look at the property, and I say to you, listen, I want the property, and we do it on a handshake. I give you 30,000 Rand deposit, and at the end of term, you say to me, no, you only gave me 15.
Exactly.
And I've got nothing on paper.
Exactly.
To prove otherwise.
You needed to have kept those receipts, the proof of the deposit, into his bank account. You needed to have recorded, and how do you record a verbal conversation?
Sure.
All the terms and conditions around it, any changes that might have occurred. So it does become very tough. And I think in this day and age, let's face it, most people realize that and do sign a proper binding agreement.
Right. Now, again, I'm gonna go back to you as the landlord, or even as the agent, for argument's sake. I've given you my deposit. Does that go straight into the landlord's bank account? Does it go into the agency's bank account? What happens with my deposit?
Okay, so there are two scenarios. So firstly, if the agency is managing the property, like the full rental service, full management service that we offer, that goes into our trust account. Okay, then the trust account laws and rules per the Property Practitioners Act apply. We have to keep that in trust. It's got to be audited. It's got to be vetted, and it is pretty secure. If it's not a managed property, and even though you've come through an agent, the agent then needs to transfer that deposit together with your first month's rent, and usually there's a commission, so it'll come out of that, over to the landlord. This again is covered in the lease agreement, And once it goes to the landlord, it's up to the landlord to keep that deposit and the interest thereon for the tenant.
Okay, so let's say, for argument's sake, I've rented a house over 10 years. Would that initial deposit that I gave you have interest-bearing value?
So the Rental Housing Act stipulates that as soon as that deposit goes to a landlord, he must keep that deposit in a bank account, and interest on that belongs to the tenant.
Okay.
They also stipulate that the interest rate cannot be lower than that of a savings account, which is a 1 or 1.5%. So it's not a lot of interest, but as you said, over 10 years, it can potentially grow.
Yeah.
When it comes to an agent, the Property Practitioners Act guides that, and the lease agreement must specify whom interest goes to.
Okay.
It is the tenant's deposit, so our lease agreement, for argument, says that the interest goes to the tenant. So that's the most logical thing to do, and obviously interest at the rate that it's earned you can't have, because the law says interest of a savings account. I take your money, I stick it into a fixed deposit, I earn 7%, but I'll pay you 1%. The law says whatever interest I earn on that account, I must pay to you as the tenant.
Okay. Now, I know I'm probably going to be jumping the gun here, Harry, but a lot of times you move out of a property and there's an inspection, and let's say, for argument's sake, the lounge walls have started fading because of maybe wiping them down too much, and the landlord says, "Listen, that wall was an egg yellow, and now it's an eggshell white now." What?
That is a very real scenario that happens quite often. But okay, you are jumping the gun a little bit.
I know.
Let's take a step back,
shall we?
So the first thing to do when the tenant moves in,
Yeah.
and you're doing the key handover, is to do an entry inspection with the tenant. Again, I'll reference the Rental Housing Act quite a lot, because the Rental Housing Act stipulates that it must be done together with the tenant must be present, and so must the landlord or the agent. Okay. In the Rental Housing Act, the agent and the landlord are used as one. So when it refers to the landlord, it refers to the agent as well, assuming the agent has a valid mandate to obviously to do this. So entry inspection, and the purpose of that is to determine any defects before the tenant moves in. A defect sounds terrible, but it sometimes is something that's not quite right in the property.
Like maybe a window that's cracked in the one corner and nobody saw it. You've obviously seen it.
Exactly.
And you've brought it to the agent's attention.
So now it gets recorded, and all of the defects that are found during that entry inspection, and literally you go around making note of everything that is potentially not perfect. And then the Rental Housing Act further says that now you determine what must the landlord do to make repairs, and what can simply be noted. So the tenant isn't held liable for that little crack when he moves out, because it was there on entry. So again, you've got to go back to the Rental Housing Act, and it specifies the condition that the property must be in. And currently, I refer to the current version because the new version of the Rental Housing Act has actually been passed already, but it's not yet been signed into law, and this is already back in 2018.
Okay.
So we're still waiting for the President to sign it into law, but the current version says fit for human habitation. Clearly that's very broad, and your definition and my definition and the next guy's definition might differ. But anyway, safe, secure, and able for a person to live in is kind of where we're at. So if there's anything that's affecting the safety, the security, or the health of a tenant, we kind of insist that the landlords make those repairs. If it is simply a little crack in a window, as you mentioned, that is not going to affect the safety and security, then we can carry on. Same thing with a carpet that's very slightly worn, or small marks on the wall, or stuff like that. That doesn't directly affect. And there's another term we like to use, the beneficial occupation. In other words, that the tenant can get what they're paying for to live in this property.
But again, I would imagine that you want that noted. Like you just mentioned, you said maybe there's a bit of wear on a carpet, but in 6 months' time, that wear might work its way right through the carpet. Who's liable then?
Okay, so that wear is just fortuitous that it equates back to the term wear and tear. So in any residential lease agreement, any item that becomes damaged because of fair wear and tear is for the landlord's account, not the tenant's account. So even though that wear should be noted,
Yeah.
the problem comes in is how do you differentiate what is wear and tear and what is damage? Damage as a result of perhaps not maintaining or negligence or something like that, and then it can become quite technical. But I think we're gonna discuss that next week.
Okay.
For now, just to say that any item of fair wear and tear, and maybe I'll just give the definition of fair wear and tear as well. So fair wear and tear is something that becomes damaged. Okay, in other words, it's not working the way it should be, as a result of the ordinary use of that item over time, or if it natural causes cause that damage. So now we're talking about the carpet example. You walk in on that carpet every day; it's going to become worn. Is that tenant damage or wear and tear? That's clearly wear and tear. Curtains or a wall that becomes slightly faded. You used the wall example earlier. Because the sun is shining on that wall every day when the curtains are opened, and the color changes slightly, the sun, natural causes, is causing that. Therefore, that would be for the landlord's account as well.
Okay. All right. Now, I've jumped the gun quite a bit this afternoon already, Harry. So I'm going to let you guide me into where we're going next.
Okay. So let's just we spoke about the deposits briefly.
Yes.
So the deposit always belongs to the tenant for the duration of the lease up until the point that tenant owes the landlord money. If the tenant owes the landlord money, either in unpaid rent or in damages or another term or stipulation of the lease, then the landlord's obviously entitled to take that. And the reason why you have the deposit is to give the landlord a bit of comfort that, especially once you move out, that if you have as a tenant caused any damage, that will be covered. So we started off with the entry inspection as well. And obviously entry inspection, exit inspection, and deposits are tied together. So we've said that during the entry inspection, you've made a list. Again, the Rental Housing Act stipulates that list be annexed to the lease agreement as a defects list, and you've identified which of those defects are simply being noted and which of the defects the landlord is now actually repairing, either before you move in or after you've moved in, if that's possible. Now you go through the course of the lease. We're at the end, and again, the lease has ended, the tenant is moving out, they've given notice, you need to do another inspection. Now the point is that you need to compare the entry and the exit inspections to see if there's any new damage that has resulted from the tenant living in the property that is not wear and tear that the tenant is liable for. And I mean, that's the reason why you have to have an entry inspection. In fact, something that very few landlords are aware of, and I guess tenants too, is that the Rental Housing Act says that if you have not done a joint entry inspection, then the landlord cannot hold the tenant liable for anything at the end of the lease. And it's an admission by the landlord that there are no defects. So that's quite a damning point, really, for a landlord if you didn't know that you had to do an entry inspection. And I can tell you, I'm sure you and I daily come across people that had no idea that they had to do, as a landlord or as a tenant, but my landlord didn't do an entry inspection with me. And now they've kept his deposit as well. So that's a very important thing to be aware of as a landlord. Make sure you do a joint entry inspection with a tenant.
We're chatting with Harry. He's from Etchells and Young, and we're chatting rentals. And I know that a lot of you are maybe in a rental property, maybe you are renting out a property. Then this is definitely one of those discussions you want to pay attention to. And we were talking about your inspections and all that kind of stuff, your entrance and your exit inspection. But I want to go back to the entrance inspection, Harry. And let's say, for argument's sake, we have gone through the property, you and I, and I find other defaults maybe a week after this inspection. What happens? Do I become liable for those defaults or not?
That's a good question, and that happens all the time. In fact, right now we're busy with quite a hectic argument with the landlord where exactly this has happened. The entry inspection was concluded. Now, 4 days later, the tenant has come back and said, hang on, here's a few more things. This tap is leaking. There's an issue with the connection of the washing machine, and one or two other things. So our lease agreement, as an Etchells and Young's lease, and many others that I've seen, actually make provision, and they give the tenant a time frame, another 5 days, another 7 days, or whatever the case may be, to report additional defects or faults or problems that they find, because this is now the first time that they're actually living in a property. You can switch a kettle on and the light comes on, but that kettle might never boil because there's a problem with that plug.
Yes.
In the same way with the oven or a geyser, it looks like it's coming on, the water is hot but suddenly goes cold or whatever. So these things do happen. So we do. It's sort of fair and pertinent to give the tenant opportunity to report extra things that they discover once they move in. But besides that, the general rules of who's responsible for maintenance in the property would still apply. And if it's day 5 or day 105 of the lease and something structurally goes wrong with the electrical system, this plug stops working, it has not been obviously damaged by the tenant. Sometimes there's just wear and tear, which is always for the landlord. A wire has loosened or whatever.
Yes.
Then that would still be for the landlord to repair, no matter when it was reported during the course of the lease. And there's going to be other items that, an example I always use is an extractor fan in a bathroom. If that thing isn't cleaned from time to time, it's going to clog up and stop working. And if that happens, it's the tenant's problem, because the tenant should be maintaining, i.e. cleaning and maybe spraying a bit of a WD-40 or Q20 or whatever into the mechanism every now and then to make sure it keeps working. So the normal rules would still apply. And I think maybe just to clarify there, in general, and the lease agreement will detail it, but this is contained in the Rental Housing Act as well, the structure of the property, the roof, the walls, the floors, the electrical system, the plumbing system, that is for the landlord to maintain and keep working. And the inside of the property, so the cleaning, the walls, the inside of the walls, for example, is for the tenant to clean and keep neat. The Rental Housing Act specifies that, for example, light bulbs, even light fittings, door handles, door hinges, that kind of thing, is for the tenant to maintain. Okay, maintain doesn't mean they must replace if it breaks because of fair wear and tear. But as I said, spray of oil, keeping a key, turning in a lock, that kind of thing, that is normally for the tenant, and these things are specified. So they will be specified in the lease, and they are specified in the Rental Housing Act as well.
I think I kind of asked you this question off air. Now, again, we're gonna kind of just do a bit of a detour, but a message that came through now from Brett saying, are there still companies that insure that you get your rent as a let's say I'm a homeowner and I rent and I bring my property to you, do you give me any kind of assurities that you'll get my rent every month?
Yeah, there are rental guarantee options out there, and that is a good question. We have looked into it a number of times, but just not found the right product. It's either very expensive, because it's an insurance premium, so you're paying for it every single month, or the insurer, the guy that's providing this rental guarantee, sets such strict criteria that you never find the perfect tenant. So, as a rental company doing this for 20 years, we've looked into 3 or 4 different options along the way. We've even considered doing a self-insurance scheme. But it's just never been worthwhile for us. I'll tell you what, the best insurance that any landlord can have is to screen tenants properly. Things might still go wrong, but as of last month, we were sitting at the end of the month on about 1.2% late payments. The current country average is about 15% tenants not in good standing. So, and that's all because, say it loudly and on the airwaves, if you screen a tenant properly, things can still go wrong, of course. Their circumstances could change, but if you do proper screening, it works out well in 98% of the cases.
Listen, I've got 150 other questions that I'd love to ask Gary, but obviously we're running out of time. But before we say goodbye to you, I want to find out what your property of the week is.
Awesome. Good thing. We've got a really awesome property right now. We've got the penthouse in the Sunset Towers, which is, border of Morningside and Sandton. We're talking about 4 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms.
Wow.
It's a little bit cramped at 475 square meters for the penthouse. Pets allowed. There's a backup generator in the building. Amazing pools. You can imagine the views from the top floor of Sunset Towers all around Sandton. You can see it out to Magaliesburg. Fireplaces, gourmet kitchens, multiple reception areas, open spaces, ensuite. Every bedroom is ensuite. This even comes with ensuite staff quarters.
Oh, wow.
It comes with 4 basement parkings as well as 2 storerooms down in the basement. So if apartment living is for you and you've got $9 million to spend, then this might have your name on it.
All right. If people want to get a little bit more information, how do they go about doing that, Harry?
Without a doubt, the best rental and sales agent in Sandton is Marius Besaidenout. So you can get hold of him, marius@etchelsandyoung.co.za as an email address, or I'll read his cell phone number, 082 302 9915. And Marius has got this as well as quite a few other awesome apartments in the Sandton and Morningside area.
Lovely. Could we see this apartment on your website?
It absolutely is. So just I think the easiest way is to find Marius on the website under our agents, or the properties for sale and listed high to low. It's going to be up in the top few.
Nice, fantastic. I hate to say goodbye to you, but I suppose we've got something to look forward to next week.
Absolutely. We're going to dig a bit deeper next week into maintenance within a rental property, who's really responsible for it, and we'll talk through a few case scenarios of what we've seen, what has happened, and how to deal with them.
Lovely. Thanks for coming into the studio, Harry, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Awesome, Al. Thank you very much.
Just give us your website address before we say goodbye to you.
2 surnames, etchelsandyoung.co.za.
And it's A-N-D, right?
The word A&D in between the word Etchels and Young. Yes.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Harry, once again, thank you for coming into the studio. We're going to continue with the music. This taking us to your traffic. It's Billy Idol and LA Woman. 084-2212-919. Man vs. Machine coming up. Stick around for that one. I've got a perler for you this afternoon.